All right, perfect. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night in some cases, and welcome to this instance of the Antrea community meeting. Today is Wednesday, January 20th, or Tuesday, January the 19th, if you are in US. And for this meeting, we will have a couple of quick announcements around one from Jay. I myself, I will introduce the results of the poll for the additional Antrea community meeting that we discussed 2 weeks ago. And then we'll, the Intel team will present their solution on CNF container networking, containerized network function, leveraging Antrea. So without waiting much more time, in the interest of time, let's get started. So we'll start with these announcements, and Jay, you're the first.
Sure, Matt, you want to go ahead and tell people about what you've been up to?
Sure, yeah. Hey, everybody. Matt Fenwick here. I've been working on network policies in the E2E suite in Kubernetes with Jay and Abhishek and a few other people, and we came up with this fuzzer to test network policies, generate a whole bunch of network policies, and then test them. And I was running that against Calico, and then Jay suggested that I should try it against Antrea, and and see what we could do there in terms of just like generating tons of network policies and testing those. So yeah, like if anybody, I mean, I don't really know a lot about Antrea, but if anybody is interested in hacking with me on that to, just do whatever we can to help Antrea, definitely, interested in that.
Yeah, sounds like the initial results. I didn't see them yet, but Matt was telling me it's interesting that we definitely don't have parity in some areas. So it'd be cool to like basically get to parity. There may be, I don't know. You said it was about 10% of the ones that you saw were different. The results, right, or
Yep.
something in
Yeah, something
thousands.
like that.
So we may have, who knows, 10, 50, 100 different scenarios to go through. Anyways, that's all we got for now, but we'll announce, we'll tell, maybe we can demo it, sometime or something. That's it. I filed an issue upstream to really move forward on the fuzzing. That's all we got.
All right. Thanks. Any comment on this? Any?
No,
Yeah,
thanks.
so just a quick question though.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, you go ahead, Antonio.
I just wanted to see if you generate random policies or you start from like a set of network policies and then you validate their implementation. Because I think there was another upstream project, and I think Jay mentioned it in the GitHub issue that was kind of like doing something similar. I think it was, what was the name, Illuminatio or something like this. I think they were like starting from like a set of they were assuming some network policies in your cluster and then validating the implementation for those policies. But it sounds like you're going one step further and you're also like generating random network policies and applying them to the cluster.
Yeah, let me take a look at that issue. I can't remember what was in there. But yeah, basically generating a bunch of network policies, generating expected results, and then comparing those to actually running against Antrea and looking for differences.
Does this test suite live in open source in a repo somewhere?
Yeah, it's under my profile right now, MIT license and all that. It's linked. I don't know if you guys saw the upstream issue. I guess I can drop a link to that in Slack. But yeah, like open source.
Yeah, we've just the history on this, Stephen, is we got the initial NetPol framework and Antrea ported over to upstream. Matt was instrumental in doing that. And so we have all those Antrea tests now in upstream Kubernetes itself under I'm sorry, under test E2E networking NetPol. And now Matt's basically extended that framework now to do more than just test policies, but actually generate thousands of policies and verify them with these truth tables of connectivity across this matrix. So it's kind of an iteration on the upstream aligned work we've already been kind of doing.
Okay, great. I see that link in Slack.
Cool. Yeah. Yeah. Let me know if you have any questions or anything. Happy to collaborate on this.
Really quick, Anthony, who should be the lead on working with Matt? I can get him started on some of the stuff, but at some point we may have to really upgrade the Antrea horsepower in terms of who's really looking at the issues. Should we just file issues or should we?
Yeah, I can help with that. I know that Abhishek is gonna go on paternity leave soon, so I can help you guys.
Okay, cool. All right, that's it. Matt, you know how to find Antonin in this. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
I'm on the community Slack too.
Three of us can work together. Great.
Awesome. Thanks.
Hey, Matt, just a quick question. Is there any ticket or something, some kind of document to understand this test suite? You have some info for the community, including the code base?
I have some really bare bones documentation. Yeah, it's I just threw it together in the last like week or so. So I'll be improving that stuff for you and stuff. But if there's any specific question, you know, like feel free to like poke me on Slack and I'll figure out some way to rate that up or just let you know or something.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, Arun, feel free. We'll get stuff hammered out in the next few days. So we just wanted to announce it a little early so we could start collaborating. But
Oh, sure,
yeah,
Jay.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
we'll get it real soon. Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thanks, Matthew and Jay. Next topic is for myself to give a summary of the survey that we circulated 2 weeks ago. This should take no more than a minute, hopefully. Let me share my screen. So you should now see a screen with the results of the summary. We didn't get many votes, just 7 votes, but still better than nothing. As you can see from the first answer, everyone prefers an office hours meeting. Then there is a slight preference for the Pacific PM time. And everyone, I mean, there's kind of a tie between a 60 and a 30 minutes meeting. Slight preference for 60 minutes. I think that perhaps it might be worth having scheduling for a 60 minutes meeting, and then, you know, if there aren't any topics or there are many attendees, the meeting can always be cut short. Asking for a preference for a specific time, we obviously get all the sort of preferences, but let's say that this is in line with a general preference for a Pacific PM meeting. And as for preferred day of the week, there is no one likes Wednesday for meetings for some reason. But I would say that 3 out of 7 votes were for Tuesday, so we can consider Tuesday to be the day. Considering this, I believe that the idea would be to schedule every 2 weeks an office hour meeting of the duration of 1 hour on Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific time. This will mean that there will be 3 p.m. Mountain, 5 p.m. On the East Coast, of course 4 p.m. Central. It will still be doable for European time zones, being 10 p.m. for Great Britain and Portugal, 11 p.m. for the rest of Central Europe, and midnight for Eastern Europe and Israel. I mean, that'll be kind of a bit late for that time zone. Asia will clearly be not doable. I mean, it will be like 6 a.m. in Beijing and 7 a.m. in Japan. But you know, this will give us the opportunity of having another meeting that has a much better coverage for United States time zones. And this will not be, however, like a community meeting in the same style as this one with a predefined agenda. It will be mostly an office hours meeting. Obviously, we can still discuss design topics and implementation topics. It will just be that the main focus of the meeting will be answering questions for community members that can come up and you know, ask for assistance, curiosity, ask for clarifications, and so on. And so if there isn't any objection, I will proceed to add to the Antrea README a note that we will start scheduling this meeting at Antrea website as well, scheduling this meeting starting next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Does that sound good to you? Is there any comment on that, on this?
Yeah, I have one. I'm just wondering, and maybe this already exists and I'm oblivious to it, but if you look at the Kubernetes project, they have a community calendar just using the free Google Calendar service.
Yeah.
And there's enough meetings now in Antrea that if we don't have one of these, we should create one so that people can either open the web page and just take a quick look to get the meeting times. And when you create that, you can click on the items and get them to load in an Outlook calendar or your personal Google Calendar or whatever you use.
Oh, that's a good point. I was actually considering having the Antrea meetings added to the Kubernetes community calendar because I believe that should be doable.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't see other, the Kubernetes community calendar right now appears to strictly have Kubernetes things going on, the SIGs
That's
and working.
right.
So I don't know that it's allowed. They're not as liberal with it as they are for creating Slack channels, but there's nothing I think that would stop us from creating our own calendar for Antrea.
That
And
sounds good.
the ownership, you already have a Google mailing list. So you give ownership of that calendar to the mailing list so that if one person goes away, you can have shared ownership of calendar entries with multiple people.
Yeah, that should be doable. It's a good idea. I can set up this calendar and maybe we'll just share a link to the calendar on the Antrea website so that people can people can download the calendar, add bookmarks in their own calendars.
Yeah, and it's a good idea because that way, if you cancel one or reschedule one, it becomes more or less automatic. And I think glancing at that calendar converts all the meeting times to your own time zone and date, which is convenient too.
That's right. That's right. That's a good idea. I'll take care of that.
Okay, great.
Okay, so thanks, Stephen, for the suggestion. And any additional comment on the community hours meeting? Perfect. So since we're already at a quarter of the meeting, I think that we can go to the presentation around CNF. I don't know, Arun, is it you that are going to present?
Yeah, so myself and Sidelu will be doing
Perfect.
this.
Perfect.
Sure.
Go ahead.
Thanks, Orlando. Yeah, thank you. I'll share my screen here. Just give me a sec.
Yeah, then we can see. Yes.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thanks, Sidelu. Yeah, so so I think if you guys can recall this, like back in December, first week of December, we came up with the final proposal from our side to support CNF, right? So CNF use case on Antrea. So I believe it was well understood by the community, and we saw pretty much a positive response from all you guys, right? So with that, so even last time itself, we told we are actually working on a demo to show more visualized confirmation about how these CNFs are expected to be implemented. So it took a little more than what we actually thought it's going to be. Also, there was a vacation time during the Christmas time and New Year. So finally, we got time now to present to the community. So indeed, we also had a quick internal sync with some of the key guys. So they may be aware of this already, but then feel free to ask your questions as you have. Just to recap on what we discussed last time. So we're not going to go to the entire details of what we presented last time, right? So if you need more details, please review the corresponding tickets where we have uploaded the PPT as well. I think Antonio uploaded the PPT there. So probably we can share the ticket details later in the Slack. Just to start with the overview in this case, we try to address the CNF use case in Antrea. As you can see at the high cluster level scenario in this case, you have a microservices running as part of your cluster. You have your provider network in this case, which is your building LAN or WAN or whatever, right? And then you have a bunch of network functions, which is running as a container, and it is still under the same cluster scope, right? So there is a load balancer, there is a next gen, and there is a SD-WAN CNF. So we just took SD-WAN as a use case in this case. We are not going to deep dive into what SLB or next gen firewall or SD-WAN CNF is doing, but then we take this only from the networking aspect of it, how we configure this chain as such, right? So there are few traffic patterns as we saw last time. Is like one of the key traffic pattern is to get the traffic out of your provider network to the internet and vice versa, right? And the other one is from the from microservices itself, right? From the cluster itself, cluster to the external network and vice versa, right? And another thing is like another thing is from the provider network to the microservices, right? So these are some of the traffic patterns which we see feasible from this SD-WAN configuration, right? So just to have a little more, any questions on this? I hope you can recall from the previous presentation, right? Okay. A little more deep dive here. Further, this gives you a overview of like how the network, the SFC traffic flow, service function chain flow for CNF is expected to happen in this case. So basically, as we described last time, so there are a couple of virtual network in this case. Basically, in this specific use case, we have two virtual network to be configured for the traffic chaining from SLB to NextGen, accordingly from NextGen to SD-WAN, right? Otherwise, like the traffic which is getting out of your provider network in this case is going to be default routed to your SLB, right? Your SLB is going to be the next hop for any traffic going out of your provider network. So this is actually a physical network connection in this case. These two are a logical network, right? So this portion, what we talk now, this is a CNF, which is virtual and it is residing in somewhere in the cloud, right? So this is your building WAN, this is your internet. And to service chain the network functions, these are actually these are actually mounted in your cluster, in a Kubernetes cluster, right? So we can deep dive on this diagram. So just to understand a little bit here, we have a subnet defined, right? So we have a subnet defined for your provider network default route in this case, which is 22.200, right? 22.x, 172.30, 22.x. This is a subnet here. And the subnet for a communication between SLB and NextGen is 33.x, right? This is what the definition. And the communication from NextGen to SD-WAN is 44.x, right? So these two are the virtual networks which we create for traffic forwarding from between the CNFs, right? So once the traffic hits your last node of a chain, the traffic is now has to be destined towards your external router, right? As per the configuration, we say like we have a TM2 external router, but for the demo need, what we did was like we just used the Antrea gateway itself as an external router in our case. So when we go through the example, I can come back here to explain further, right? As of now, you can just understand like this is the actual traffic flow and pattern which we are going to experience with the quick demo with Antrea. Right. So the another aspect here to understand is the default route, right? So when it comes to a traffic forwarding at this level, right? Let's take an example of next-gen firewall. When the traffic has to be forwarded towards the east, or in this case, a northbound, we can say. In this case, let's assume that east-west traffic, right? So the traffic is forwarded towards east, it's going to follow the default route in this case, right? So any traffic which is forwarded from your provider network to outside world is always going to go through the default network. It's a typical routing principle in this case, right? So at the same time, when there is a reverse communication happens, the node at the level X, the CNF at the level X should be aware of all the subnet on its left side, right? For example, if you take SD-WAN, SD-WAN should be aware of the entire tree on the left side, right? So SD-WAN should be aware of 22, 44, and 33, right? All the subnets should be aware at this level. That's the only way that it can route the traffic back to the network, or route the traffic which is actually bound to the internal provider network from the external internet services. Okay, so at the same time, like the external router should always be pointing towards the SD-WAN CNF as the default route for any traffic which is destined to these subnets on our chain. Is it clear? Okay, so
I think so.
yeah, sure, thank you. Before we jump on to the real demo scenarios, we just want to summarize exactly like what changes we see has to happen to achieve this CNF use case in Antrea, right? So as what we have done is a POC. Basically, we modified the Antrea code. Some of the things are hard coded, right? So, but ultimately, when we implement this feature, it's going to be impacting these areas. So one is the Antrea controller update, as we discussed last month. So what we need here is like there is a new controller module, or currently we have a monolithic controller, right? So either we modify the existing controller or introduce a new controller, which would basically understand the CNF pod configuration, right? Basically, CNF CRD has to be parsed, and it has to basically understand multiple interface support, right? So basically, if we see the use case, if you take the CNF, which is basically a CNF pod in this case, for him, he has to have interface to support the left side, interface to support the right side traffic, right? And also an interface to support internal cluster communication, right? So basically, we expect 3 interface to be configured when it comes to a CNF use case, right? In this case, like basically what it means to Antrea is Antrea, once it recognizes a pod is actually a CNF use case pod, it has to go and create multiple VF pairs or VFs, right? If we have a SRIOV device to be supported, so we will have a VF to be configured. So ultimately, from the container perspective, it is about like a network interface, right? Either it's going to be a VF pair, like what we do currently for the default network configuration, or it's going to be VF if it's SRIOV, right? So another thing is the virtual network update between CNFs. So one is the interface itself, and another thing is like what subnet is configured, what gateway information configured for per interface configuration, right? So these are the key aspect which the controller to understand from the CRD definition of your CNF pods, right? Once it understands that, it has to generate a pod annotation. So basic use case here is like we expect this to be supported either at the chain configuration to be supported at the init or at the runtime, both cases, right? So we expect pod annotation. So if there is a new CRD push towards the controller parse that, and he generates the pod annotation support, pod annotation to the pod to communicate what interface has to be configured and what is a subnet to be configured, right? So there is also an ask like, hey, why do we need a controller in this case? Why can't we play with the pod configuration itself at the node level or the pod level, right, during the init? So which we are exploring further, which we need to see how does it really make sense to go that route, or we still feel I mean like valuable to have a controller itself in this case. Okay. And the major impact otherwise is the Antrea agent itself. right? So one of the main thing is the CNF to support multiple interface. So the main thing what we know now is, right, so Antrea supports the network configuration for application pods, right? So what it means to us is like either traffic is destined or originated at this pod level, right? So what we support right now is we create a pod. So the traffic is either generated from here or destined to here, right? Basically, we are not supporting a forwarding use case. So what we need to do in Antrea CNI is to implement multiple interface support. So we need to update some of the utility and library functions to add the multiple interface via that configurations, right? Otherwise, it's going to be mostly a code reuse. We already have a predefined function which takes care very well about creating the VH pairs and stuff. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just pass different interface names. So as of now, we assume, Antrea assumes that we have a single interface to be attached to the OVS bridge, right? So there's just some naming conventions to be taken care, some minor modifications to be done to the algorithm of generating the interface name, right? So having said that, we can reuse most of the code in this case with some minor modifications, which adapts as to help implementing multiple interface at the CNF part scope. Any questions?
So
Okay.
I have a question
Yeah.
for IPAM. I think you once mentioned that you plan to use, I think it's wireless bots to do IPAM. Is that still the case?
Sorry, what is that?
For IP allocation.
Yeah, for IPAM, what?
I remember you mentioned originally you plan to use wireless bots for iPad. Or is that?
Yeah, Junjun. Actually, we are considering 2, 3 open sources. We are not yet decided on that.
Yeah, we are not decided yet on that. Yeah.
Currently, we hard coded it.
In your demo, what solution you used?
Currently, we hard coded.
I see.
As of now, it's hard coded. As of now, it is hard coded.
Okay, got it.
Yeah. Basically, there is no controller implementation for our POC, right? So POC is only in this segment. We have not implemented a controller for this. This is something which we want to discuss and decide the architecture, finalize the architecture before we implement. As of now, it's all hard coded. Like when you generate when there is a pod creation event comes, Antrea CNI looks at the pod name, and there is a predefined set of pod names for this communication for this POC. Based on the pod name, he configures the interface just for the POC need. Okay, so another main aspect here is the Antrea agent and the OVS flows has to be reconfigured for CNF traffic interface, right? So, we are also marking at the classifier level, at the OVS classifier level, we do mark the traffic which is actually coming through or getting into coming through mainly or coming through the CNF interfaces, right? So anything which is not default, it is a CNF interface in our case as of now, which is ETH1 and ETH2, right? So we mark it to differentiate the CNF flow from the traditional, our existing Antrea default flow, right? Just to differentiate the CNF traffic. So as of now, as per the POC, we are handling the traffic in the same BR init OVS bridge. So there was also a proposal to use a different bridge because of the SRI where we support dependencies and stuff, right? So probably we may consider that. So the current implementation, so because it's based on mainly the application pod, right? So the current implementation assumes that as part of the Snoop table, I hope all of us understand the OVS flow, the pipeline, which is well documented in the Antrea community, where you have the packet when the packet is going out of the table 10, I believe, right? Table 20 or 10. Yeah, table 10. Snoop table, once it hit the Snoop table, we ensure that packet is hitting that interface is sourced with the MAC address and IP address of that specific interface, right? Which will not be true for CNF, because CNF, we are looking into forwarding use case instead of traffic origination or termination, right? We are looking into forwarding. So what we had to do was like, we had to modify the Snoop flow to allow the CNF traffics. Basically, don't look for IP address and MAC address as of now. We still need to do some stringent checks to see for additional any security measures in this case. Because as of now, it's like, okay, don't look for, if it's coming from the CNF interfaces, treat it as a forwarding traffic and push it towards the next stage. Don't look into IP and MAC address. As I said, like basically we had to modify the table 0, 10, and 20, and for the immediate needs, and also table 70, the L3 forwarding has to be modified as well for the tunnel specific communications, right? So your next hop, basically when you take this thing, so your next hop can either be in the same node, or it may be in some other node across your cluster. In your cluster, right? So this will be on node 1, this will be on node 2, or these two are going to be in the same node, right? So we need to have some logic to find out that basically your next hop is not local to you on the same node. So we need to create L3 table updates for the GNU tunnel based communication, right? This is what we discussed last time. When the next hop is actually across node, we are going to use the GNU tunnel. So we are going to follow everything as is, like what Antrea defines right now. So the CNF use case will be built based on how it works as of now. So only thing is we support the forwarding use case now. Yeah. So yeah, so these are the updates I missed to mention about table 70 right now. So for demo needs, what we have done was we have not supported the tunnel use case yet. So we supported, like basically we made sure with the pod affinity, the pod is getting created only on the same node for demos, many demo needs. So another main thing which has to be updated is the Antrea agent to configure the route table on the CNF pods, actually pod scope, also in the host scope. Right. Basically, in the pod scope, it has to configure the default route the same way like what we discussed about. Right. So all this route programming has to be taken care in the pod scope. Right. When it is CNF, so Antrea needs to go and configure these route information in the pod scope. That is in container scope. And also he has to make sure that configure the IP table rule updates, if any, and also the route table updates at the host scope, right? Which is in the agent or OVS daemon scope. So, right? Does it make sense? Yeah. So pretty much this
is to me.
Sure, that's great. Thank you. So that's what we mentioned, right? So default route is required for your next hop routing. That is your right side traffic. Route update for reverse and left traffic is your left side traffic configuration. This is what we discussed, right? So the firewall update has to be taken care for any masquerading needs or any kind of packet flow acceptance in this case, right? That is required from the host scope. So routing table has to be updated as well on the host scope. We can see this example directly out there. Any specific questions? If not, we can go to the live demo and see how it works.
Yes, I have one quick question that's
Sure.
still related somehow to IPAM that Achanjan asked earlier on. The virtual network, the IP addresses for the virtual network, those, unlike every other network that we create with the node local IPAM controller, that network, yes, it's spread across all the nodes in the deployment. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's an idea right now. So we will use the local IPAM controller is what we are thinking about. We are ready to decide. So we are going to use the IPAM controller for sure for that.
Okay, yeah, for the virtual networks as well.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
Okay. I see. And right, then the second thing is that probably not part of this demo, but I don't know if it's part of the overall project, traffic steering for selecting which CNFs given traffic should support. Is that something on your roadmap?
You mean multiple SFC, right? That's what you mean.
Yes.
So that is definitely, as Sidlu explained last time, it's a second phase approach.
Yeah.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
great. Thank you. Sorry, I missed that last time.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Actually, we are working on the classifier. We'll do the traffic steering accordingly. Maybe we'll present as a phase 2.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, the controller approach, or yeah, that's right. Yeah, thanks, Silo. So the controller approach is like why we think of controller approach in this case. Like controller has the a global view of the cluster in this case, right? So he knows which node is part of the chain and what subnet has to be configured, right? So that way, it gives a global scope, global view of the chain. That's what we thought. Like having a separate controller which understands the CNF use case would be nice. Okay. You can see the screen right now. I have a mobile
Yes, sir.
phone. Yeah,
Yeah.
sure. So, so just to show, I have a cluster. I have a cluster, and I have a chain running for last 40 minutes, I believe. So I just before the call, I just started the chain. So as we discussed, so there is like a provider network, there is a SD-WAN and SLB and the next gen, right? As we saw from the diagram. So I use the same names as such, and the POC is defined in a way. If he sees these names, he knows what to be done based on the subnets. So it's not fully hard coded. I use some of the test functions to generate the IPAM actually, right? So there are IPAM specific test functions which I use to generate the subnet based on the data structure defined for the specific subnet. Okay. So before we get on it, we can see. So this is the CRD or the part spec defined. It's very simple. All we have is like the container, which is like basically a busy box in this case. And it's a privileged container, obviously. And we have the environment variable set because we are behind Intel proxy. So we need things to work fine. So we have the environment set. So as I mentioned, so we are not really supporting the tunnel, means node-to-node communication in the POC as of now, right? I'm working on it right now, adding a support for it. It will be done soon. So just to make this demo, make sure that everything works fine. So we put a pod affinity in this case. So basically, all these the chain nodes are going to be spawned in the single node, right? It's going to be spawned in the single node itself. So it's like it's a pod-to-pod communication within the node, right? So we used pod affinity to make sure that the next gen firewall will always be started on an SLB, and SD-WAN will always be started in next gen firewall, which means all these are chained and kind of everything comes under the same node, right? So for the provider network also, we have the environment variables set, and also I had to configure the DNS because we are behind proxy in our internal network. So to make communication work without any flaws, instead of additional any manual things, I have this also configured. Right, as you can see from here, all these 4 nodes were spawned under the same single node. Right, for now we are supporting only this use case. Ideally, in a real implementation, we need to support communication between nodes through Geneva tunnel. Right, so I have 4 terms windows created here. This is provider network, and this is SLB. Okay, so it's kind of exit for some reason. Okay, it's here. This is SLB. Maybe we can go with the interface definitions. So this is the provider network case. If we go back to our diagram, we take this. 1 sec. Sorry about that. So this portion, right? So instead of having a separate VM, right? So in our configuration, all these things are running in single VM, and the internet also, I created another VM like as a destination for us just to reach, just a typical ping or trace route to show the flow. Instead of having another VM, so I just created one more cluster one more pod in the same cluster as PN, right? Provider network to initiate the traffic in this case, right? The west traffic from our side. So if you see here, the key aspect to take care in this case is like the interface, right? So what we plan to do is to support Antrea's default network configuration for the cluster level communication, right? So this is the internal subnet CIDR assigned for the cluster. So Antrea picks up and configures the E0, right? So the POC code goes and configures the ETH2 interface in this case. So it's defined if it is left side ETH1, if it is right side, it is ETH2. Okay, it picks up based on the network direction, packet direction, interface direction. So you can see that it configured the interface with 2200. And the key aspect to see here is the next hop route has been updated with gateway 22200, right? So this is what we see from here, right? 2200 to 22200, right? Any packet which is going out, he's destined towards SLB with the default gateway assigned to 22200. Basically, the traffic, we say that, hey, any external traffic, next stop is this guy, right? So in the SLB case, if you go to SLB, so you will see three interfaces, and as we discussed, one is the Antrea default network. ETH1 is my left provider, left network. ETH2 is my right network, right? There's 22.200 and 33.100 is the right network. So if we have, if you see the route updates in this case, he knows 22.200 is the left side of the network, and obviously 33 subnet is also known to him because it is his right network. So if we go to next gen firewall, in this case, the same configuration here, you have two interfaces and you do the route configuration. You can see that basically it knows about 22, 33, and 44, right? 44 is his right side, 22 and 33 are his left side, as you see from this diagram. From next gen, 33 and 22 are left side, 44 is his right side. That's what we see. 44 is towards ETH2. 22 and 33 are actually on left side, right? So another main thing here is like, because the 22 subnet is not directly reachable, right? Basically, you don't have a 22 subnet in the interface here, right? So when you try to program the route, it's going to throw an error like network not reachable or unreachable, right? So we need to make sure we need to see anything other than the very next subnet. It has to be programmed as on link, just to fake the communication. You are just telling the Linux networking stack as if like, hey, actually this guy is on your link, though you don't see an interface relevant to his subnet. It's already done that way in Antrea as well for Antrea Gateway 0. Right. So the last one here is the SD-WAN. As you can see, the route, it's all the three subnets are known here, right? So what we do is just a deviation from what you saw from the diagram here. So in the diagram, we say the traffic is actually going out to the external network. So to make things simplified, so the actual traffic is going towards the gateway 0. I mean, Antrea gateway 0. Right? So the traffic has been put back through gateway 0 in the same node. So basically the chain is, the traffic is going through the chain, and finally it goes out of your Antrea 0 interface in our case. But in ideal scenario, this will not be the case. Just to simplify the demo, we did that, right? So this is the end server which I'm using. This is 165.15.169. This is the server which we assume it to be an internet server or something like that. It's outside your cluster. Okay, this is something outside your cluster. So I'm going to do a trace route in this case. Yeah. So as you can see that the traffic, like based on the routing information we have right now, the packet is hitting your 22200, which is your SD-WAN. Next, it goes to 33,200, which is your next gen firewall. Then it goes to 44,200, which is your SD-WAN, right? These are the ports. These are the CNFs, right? These three subnets are the CNF subnets, which the traffic is flowing through. And finally, it goes out of the node from your Antrea Gateway 0, right? This is a subnet. This is the gateway IP for Antrea Gateway 0 in this case. And finally, it reaches to the end server, which is another VM in our case. This is actually, the cluster is running in one VM, and there is another VM which is outside the cluster. Right? So does it make sense? So if I want to go do any kind of other activities like www.example.com. So it goes through the chain and resolves through our internal proxy and stuff. It pulls the content, right? So that data is actually get pulled through the chain right now. So the actual use case, right? So these are dummy pods or containers as of now. The actual use case, if you take this diagram, so if you take basically you go and install a next gen firewall. Let's say you install some open source firewall module here, you configure and you want to do a traffic shaping, that can very well be done, right? So if a traffic is generated from a specific source, limit the traffic or drop the packet or whatever, right? We can do that, right? So now the packet has been put through the chain, it's configured through Antrea, and now it's up to the service function. Let's say the SLB has to do some load balancing. He can decide on the next hop and then still route through the chain, right? So only thing we need to make sure is that the next hop is always reachable through the chain. Yeah. Yeah. So does it make sense? Any questions specifically here?
No, I think you can go ahead.
Yeah, so that's kind of summarizes the CNF flow in Antrea. And also we discussed about the open challenges, what we have right now, and probably we had an internal discussion as well with Anton and Jinjiang a few days back, and there are some inputs which we are looking to explore and kind of come up with the next level of information for that.
Perfect. I believe we still have 10 minutes in the meeting, and so we can probably open the floor for any question or comment that the community might have regarding this presentation. So I would like just to thank you very much, Arun and Saidulu, for this POC work and this very nice presentation. And if you have any question or comment, please go ahead.
Thank you. Sure.
Yeah, it's very cool demo. I have one question. Probably I missed it when you already shared it, but I missed it. So when we configure the chain, we just need the chain CRD, right? We don't need to update the port spec itself, right?
Right. So chain CRD, that's what we are thinking about controller, right? So controller to have a global scope of the chain at the cluster, right? If we downstream it to the pod spec, it may be relatively difficult or may not be handy for runtime configuration changes, right? So somebody needs to understand the entire picture of the chain and configure the corresponding pod. So from the pod level, it's all about, okay, how many interface I have to create? What is my subnet per interface?
Got it. I remember in our first discussion, you guys also mentioned about some port allocation and also virtual network CRD.
Yes, Jan, that is for the interfaces actually, basically. Arun, I think we have other slide right there we can show.
Let me pull that here, Silo. So it's mainly for, I believe I have it here. Yeah.
Pods here.
So the pod annotation is expected to come something like that. So basically we say virtual net 1, virtual net 2, what is the interface? What is the interface name? So basically the agent needs to understand that now. This is coming from the controller scope, right? Agent need to understand this pod annotation and configure the interfaces. This is how we communicate what interface and subnets to be configured.
Janjan, basically this one show what is a subnet of this virtual network 1 and 2. That was the intention of this annotation.
Got it. But in the case of a chain, I think we automatically create virtual network, right?
Yeah, we create the virtual networks for which particular part, what interface part of the which virtual network. Arun, I think we have SFC CR, right? There we can SFC CR.
Oh yeah,
that
network
is
CR.
Yeah. Yeah, here, Janjan, we can see that
I see.
this is, yeah, right. So we can see.
I see. It's my fault. I kind of forgot this. Okay.
Yeah, so basically we have a network chain here. Yeah, right. So basically it tells this is what it's a global picture in our case, right? So SLB connect to NextGen through virtual network 1, NextGen connects to SD-WAN through virtual network 2.
So the workflow is that. Oh, go ahead.
Go on, please go on.
I'm trying to understand the complete workflow. Basically, we still need to define what the virtual networks used by chain. And then we define a chain here using this network chain in CRD.
Yes.
And
yes,
do we also need to allocate the ports? Or that
Yeah,
will be done? Okay.
Yes, parts basically for the interfaces, basically. This is additional handy so that when the pod is getting created, automatically we can create the interfaces with these subnets.
Okay, this one is also by user, right? User need to allocate the ports.
Yes.
I see. Warren, I was thinking if we have a controller, maybe the controller automatically annotate the ports or automatically create the interface on the ports since you already have a chain CRD.
Exactly, that's what Arun was saying. In case we want to maintain in the controller entire SFC blueprint so that we can skip the pod annotations.
I see. Okay, but virtual network will still be predefined.
Yes. Virtual network basically for the IPAM. So for the each virtual network, what is the subnet? That part.
For the in theory, even for virtual network, since you have its chain spec,
yeah,
I was
here
thinking
we can create it. Yeah,
we can
exactly.
automatically create it. Okay.
Exactly.
That's my point. Okay, thank you guys for clarifying.
Yes.
Yeah, so the trace route is the easy way for us to find out the packet traversal path, right? So with that we can confirm it's working as expected. Any other questions? Yeah, if not, we are done for today from our side, from the demo perspective.
All right, so thank you very much. And if there is no additional question, I think that we can conclude this discussion on CNF in Antrea. I would like to thank again Saidulo and Arun for this work, and I really look forward to the integration in Antrea. And is there any final topic that we'd like to bring up for today? Waiting like 30 seconds for community members to come up.
Well, Luis, since you are here, I will ask how's it going over there with Windows? I'm assuming there's some interesting news. There's always something new going on, right?
Do you mean the updates of Windows?
Yeah, anything worth mentioning?
I think I have no important updates. Just about the issues the Perry created yesterday night. So it's about an issue. The pod cannot to access the Kubernetes service, Kubernetes API service. I think it's a big problem. So I'm still working on to debug the OS flows. But I think it's a hard question. I may need time to debug it.
Yeah, the services stuff. In general, upstream, I feel like in general we need a good service diagnostic. I mean, I think we need one for Linux. I mean, we have conformance tests and stuff, but the services upstream are so complicated to figure out what tests are testing what, and I don't think we have one for Windows either. But the particular bug Perry found was around services, headless services. Was that the bug, or was it cluster IPs, or what?
The service we met in issue is different from the common service. It's because the endpoint of the service is the IP of the endpoint is a node IP, not the a private port side IP. So that's a difference.
Okay, so it's a node port service bug.
Yeah, then we'll make OS make our current pipeline to both do the SNIT and the DNIT on same packet. So I'm not sure if these two operations happen to at the same time cause the issue.
Okay, cool.
Mhm.
All right, so really it's just a matter of us having tests in place for node port services in the future, I guess.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, I will make sure that those tests exist in upstream
Okay.
for SIG Windows if we don't have them already. Okay, well that's great. Thanks for all the work y'all are doing. It's always great to see the new Windows stuff rolling in. It's getting better every day. It's great.
Thanks, Jay. We will add more tests for continuity.
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll have more. I actually have network policy tests working on Windows for Antrea using the network policy framework. And in that, we found a new bug where you get a hang with AGN host, and it's related to containerd not properly on Windows, not properly cleaning up log files. So we thought it was a network policy Antrea level issue, and then I dug more into it, and I was finding that I was just getting these pods that were hung all over the place, and so there's a lot of interesting issues there. The probing containers also don't support UDP properly in AGN host, which is the normal end-to-end container that they use for all the end-to-end tests. So I'm digging through all that stuff, but I'll keep you posted.
Okay, thanks, Jay.
Yeah.
All right, any final question? We are at the top of the hour, so really if you have one little final questions, you can go ahead. And otherwise, I will stop the recording in 10 seconds. All right, so I will stop the recording now. I would like to thank everyone for attending this meeting, and there will be an official announcement about the office hours community meeting for next week, and as suggested by Stephen, we'll also add a calendar for tracking these meetings. Thank you again for attending, and talk to you next week.
Thank you.